Chris, you've always believed that Ayn Rand was a person of great importance to the libertarian movement. Was she libertarian? Why was she important? I mean, what is her distinctive contribution to that movement?
Right, well, just one minor confusion. Because Ayn Rand didn't like some of the libertarian thinkers, she declined to call herself a libertarian and denounced libertarianism in general, which is quite absurd, since of course she was a libertarian thinker, i.e. she was an advocate of individual liberty, which is what the word libertarian means. The fact that some other libertarians might have faulty philosophies or made errors in their approaches, neither here nor there. You know, she is a libertarian, so it's quite absurd for some sort of bizarre cultists who, alas, have attached themselves to the Ayn Rand movement to sort of say she wasn't a libertarian. It's just insane. You might as well say she wasn't a woman, you know, and wasn't a novelist, because she didn't like other novels.
Yes.
Well, of course, historically, for a start, Rand was an enormously significant figure. Although there might well have been a revival of libertarian ideas generally without Rand, there were other thinkers working on, you know, the liberal project, so to speak. It was nevertheless Rand who, in her very moving and very well written novels, sort of exploded throughout the world onto the market, and basically showed people that there was both a moral case for liberty, there was a coherent and integrated intellectual case for liberty, and she also, of course, publicised other writers, notably von Mises and the Austrian school, and did an enormous amount in drawing their work to the attention of people. So certainly as a historical phenomenon, Rand was enormously important, and still is important. She is, in many respects, a lot of people's first exposure to a coherent libertarian argument. I mean, there are people who come in via other means, by science fiction, or reading Milton Friedman, or reading von Mises, or reading Hayek, or reading the publications of the IEA, or whatever. But on the whole, you know, Rand is perhaps the predominant, most significant person in bringing people to a libertarian political ideology.
But she was.
Now, she was also, and now the other reason I think she's important is because, unlike other libertarian thinkers, she was basically trying to create a complete and thoroughly consistent and fully integrated philosophy. She wasn't just a political philosopher, she was a philosopher, and she saw the importance of more fundamental areas of thinking to the political realm. I mean, she saw the way in which basically if you made certain epistemological errors, this was going to underline the whole of the rest of the structure of your thought and lead someone into areas of ways of thinking which would result in statism or fatal concessions to statism and so on. So she was important because she recognised the broader importance of philosophy in general and the importance of a fully integrated, systematic defence of capitalism. I think she used some of this expression, you can't fight Karl Marx with Republican, you might say, you know, Conservative Party pea-shooters. You need to have a fully integrated philosophical system, and that's what she attempted to do in her philosophy, which she called objectivism. She called it objectivism because she felt that epistemology was the most important area of philosophy, and that the core, what was the essence of her epistemology, was objectivity and the ability of human beings to think objectively and arrive at objective conclusions.
Is that why she was so hostile to Kant?
Yes.
And after all, very few people read.
Yes, yes. Well, she saw, and I think, I suppose basically rightly, that it was Kant who, in effect, brought in sort of rigorous scepticism into Western philosophy and undermined basically any rational philosophical project in Western political thought. And although of course Kant himself was an inconsistent thinker, insofar as he was a political thinker, he was a sort of classical liberal. Nevertheless, she saw his epistemology as having disastrous consequences upon Western philosophy as a whole, and hence upon him being a sort of the major sort of scare figure of philosophy. By the way, incidentally, this was in some respect Nietzsche's view as well, and she was influenced to a degree by Nietzsche, and Nietzsche took very much the same line. So now, did she succeed in creating a fully integrated philosophy? Well, no, she didn't. You know, there are huge areas of philosophy she didn't write on, questions she didn't address, and indeed there were some errors in her own thinking in what she did address. And specifically, I would argue that her support for the limited state and her rejection of anarchism was a disastrous, indeed cretinously stupid position to take. Indeed, her arguments against anarchism are just risible, absolutely risible, and those of her orthodox followers ever since have not improved. So did she succeed in creating that fully integrated philosophy? No. Did she go a long way in doing it? Yes. She did, and there are a large number of people now, increasing numbers, working on her philosophy, working from those basic axioms and producing very good material.
It is said, though, Chris, that she did impose an almost totalitarian conformity on those around her. She insisted that her followers should smoke. She did not like them to listen to Mozart.
Okay, let me come in straight away there. She never insisted that her followers smoked. It's true that, like many, well, in fact, like all intellectual, political movements, whether it's psychoanalysis or Popperian philosophy or anything else, it's true that almost every movement founded by a specific thinker usually ends up gaining some sort of cult-like qualities, and there's certainly elements of this in the behaviour of Rand and Nathaniel Branden and the early days of her own sort of inner circle of people. Although, again, one should point out these have been, in some respects, grossly exaggerated by critics and people with axes to grind, and indeed by people who are adherents of other cults. I mean, it's often the words pot, kettle and black come to mind when you see Rothbard or certain colleagues of Rothbard talking about the Rand cult, you know, when they're busy erecting their own cult of Murray Rothbard, you know. But this is just, I just shrug my shoulders at all this, you know. Anyone who knows anything about intellectual history knows that without section, every intellectual movement ends up with some degree of this sort of behaviour, with elements of cultism and elements of sort of small group dynamics of demands for adherence to particular viewpoints. Now, with Rand, some of these have been exaggerated. Sometimes some claims are true, sometimes they're untrue. You know, to me, all this is quite irrelevant because I recognise its universality. You know, well, so what? Let's get on with the important stuff. Of, you know, are the arguments right? That's what's important. You know.
But as you say, with Rand, she does attempt to construct an integrated system of philosophy, and surely art is an important part of that. And so we can perhaps reject or even laugh at specific judgments she makes, but would you agree that that an integrated theory of philosophy does require some kind of philosophy of art?
Oh, absolutely, I do, yes. And again, often Rand's been unfairly treated because things have been sort of taken out of context, and people sort of claim that she said you had to like this, you know, when in fact she didn't say that at all. And she recognised the variety of subjective elements that also go into artistic appreciation. I agree with her. I believe that a basic objective philosophy art is accessible to us, but that doesn't incidentally necessarily mean that that everyone therefore has to agree in personal preference and personal taste on particular things.